Welcome to lesson number 4. So, lesson number 4 is about security architecture design in terms of infrastructure. This one is the infrastructure security consultant course, and so it's extremely important that we discuss about design. When I started my career 20 years ago, was obviously the time of perimeter security. So it was quite common in security to compare the security of an infrastructure with a castle. And it's something that got lost along the way because it was too built on the perimeter security. But it was the most fascinating example of how security design is actually done against an attacker. And so each security choice is done for a reason. So castle got designed initially with wood wall, and so the perimeter was all wood fences. But the attacker started to attack it with fire, and it was too easy to pass through. So the the wood choice was done because it was quicker, was costing less time, less people to made it, was easier. We tried to make multiple lines, but it was still too easy for the attacker to use fire. Everybody look at a castle, and here you have a beautiful picture of a Sirmione castle. I have beautiful memories on this castle, but it's actually something that you'll find in every design. Every design is having a ditch around the wall with water. In this case, is on a lake, was extremely easy to do a canal, but the main reason for that is not because they hope that the attacker is drawing. It was because when they started to do building walls, the attacker was going under the land, under the wall, making an hole to make it collapse it. And so back then, obviously, do that kind of or digging an hole underwater wasn't so easy like it is today. And so the every decision in the building and the design of a castle is having a reason, and the reason is always the attacker. We lost a bit this perception of keeping in sync attack infrastructure choice, and you'll find various examples. I when I'm talking and thinking about pass, and so I'm thinking about Castra. Castra is the design that was done for the Legion every time they needed to sleep. So they were doing a long trip. Every night they were building a Castra. And the reason was to defend themselves. They were trying to find a place flat where the visibility was good and the design was this one. So if you're interested, you can find that on the Wikipedia page under Castra. So it's fascinating if you see the design. So you see how many of these choices are still valid nowadays for attacker. So here there was the ditch to avoid and to pass under. But what is fascinating is this concept. If you see the entry is having double gates, the main reason was that if an attacker was passing, there was an extra gate going down to stack the attacker. And on top here, where you don't see much, there was a tank of oil, warm oil, hot oil, water and sand. So the idea was to close the attacker within the two gates, and so the one external and the one internal, and just throw oil and sand and water down. So the design uh, it was always done like that to let the attacker at a certain stage to get in, but to get trapped. And this one was the Castra was designed every night, so they had to carry on everything to build it. The fact is that castle is it wasn't relevant anymore at the time that they had the cannon, because obviously even the walls wasn't never standing, and that was the end of the castle as a safety. And so, do we have something similar where we keep in check if our design is still relevant? And I will be honest with you, the answer is probably no, because we do see how the attacker is right now using more and more DevOps orchestration. All ransomware as a service is extremely automated. The attack is now modular. The payload change based on what they found along the way. And our concept of attack surface is actually quite limited. We scan the environment from outside to inside, but we get exploited because a command center from inside can keep a connection and can do a reverse connectivity due to the fact that the design wasn't considering that. We do threat modeling, but nobody teaching you threat modeling is explaining the limit of a threat model. The threat model is valid as much you can think about the attacker, but the security architect is not specialized on pen testing or in forensics. And so you see the limit here, where each expertise is needed to define the infrastructure. So if you are an old professional, if you are just approaching to the market, don't get fooled by the way how the industry is kind to push you on just one direction. The fact that you have an understanding of forensics and the fact that you have an understanding of pen testing make you a good architect. Miss one of that, you'll never be capable to forecast what will happen. And you'll not be capable to think of infrastructure in that way. And we see this as thing in the industry because everything is focused on just pen testing. We see how the potential of cloud for forensics is not fully explored. And that is another big limit that we are having. You could expect this lesson to be about defense in depth, zero trust, but it's not that the skill that I can teach you. First of all, because you have tons of resources that can teach you that. You need the expertise and the experience to change the topic. So when you see a fuss and you are doing a design, you struggle to find the consistency across a cloud service provider because the function as a service is different. There are projects that are trying to unify that. But you need to think also how the attacker will exploit that. So I found myself to have to secure things when security controls were not mature in that space. And it's always a challenge. And it's a challenge that you'll have to cope with in your entire career. And be a forward thinker. It's not a guessing game. You know that the attacker will use more automation. You have a case study where, for example, APT is using Kubernetes for brute forcing. You do have a history of how bots are distributed and automated. So it's quite funny if we think about a threat modeling only based on the technique of Mitre. We are not going to cover what is next. Our concept of SecDevOps is extremely binded to the pipeline, but at the same time we are pushing a SOAR that is something separated and it's not always integrated in the pipeline. You'll find a playbook pointed to the pipeline to do another automation. That's not the way how it should be from an architecture perspective. If you think that you created a service mesh like the one that you see here with Castra, and you have a lot of controls within the service mesh, but you have a service, each service with an API without an API gateway. You haven't done a good design, and it's not you and pointing the finger to you. Is they are not teaching to the architects to think in this way, and that is the reason why we see on the newspapers on many news, because API gateways are the best exploitation pattern, because actually SOC are struggling to monitor all that data. Think about the verbosity that, for example, a mobile application is having calling continuously API. And so how often API attacks are passing under the monitor. I didn't prepare a slide, and the main reason is because I was really hoping that you could listen to my broken accent and trying to focus on what I'm trying to teach you. It's a way of thinking. It's not nothing else. So of entire course, if you need to pick a lesson, I think this one is obviously the one where I put more, because it's to give you the tool to think ahead. And to think ahead, it's possible only if you spend efforts to invest in multiple areas. So the recruiter will want you to have a profile and a list of certification. Your boss will want you to be specialized on just one cloud service provider, or probably more, but because we are going to multi-cloud. But you understood what I mean. Uh, don't focus only on what somebody else wants, but what you need to do the job. And to do the job, you need to be curious and explore all areas of security, not just one. You can't be a good security architect if you don't see forensics, if you don't know which forensics capabilities you are having. And you are not good security architect if you don't have an understanding of all way an attacker can change the kill chain. So I do hope you enjoyed this lesson with this reference to history, but I think it is really relevant. I loved to explore why they designed something in a castle and which type of attack they were mitigating. I know perimeter security is not anymore a good way to do it. But we always have a reference to military and to strategy. And it's fascinating the fact that everybody refers to those, but never study those. So I'm not saying that you'll find an answer to everything in there, but you'll see an approach on thinking that is always based on experience. And I can mention something that I read on a book, but it's really fascinating about during the war. um they were trying to analyze how to fix airplane that got into a fight, and so somebody decided to start to count the holes into all these air flights, and somebody proposed to enforce those areas because they got shooted there, and everybody thought that was a good idea. But somebody else that was thinking out of the box thought that the one that they were analyzing, they were the only one that made it back. They could be capable to land back after the fight. And in a war, you should care about the one that didn't make it. And so what they did, and what this person suggested, sorry, I don't remember the name, was enforce the area where you don't see shooted, any kind of sign of a shoot, because those are the one that probably, if impacted, didn't let the air flight to come back. And that was the way how they reinforced the design. And so it's always a design thinking based on how the attack is happening. And sometimes you need to think also on what you don't see, on what you don't think. If it wasn't, sorry, a mosquito. If it wasn't for this approach, we wouldn't done any progress. And so my suggestion is keep in mind these stories. Uh, it wasn't to waste your time, it was to give you a way of thinking. And the reason why I love security architecture is because you can focus on each vulnerability, but if you fix a security architecture pattern that is wrong, you'll win. And that is the way you should go. Be curious, argue, and do a better design. Ready for the future. That is the message that I want to pass you. Thanks a lot for having me. Subscribe and you'll get notified when lesson 5 is out. Okay? Take it easy. Cheers. Bye bye.